love my girls, and I love my wife, and I just want her to be found.
But investigators told a different story, arresting Barry Morphew, the charges ranging from first-degree murder to tampering with physical evidence. Prosecutors argued that Morphew discovered his wife was having an affair, then murdered her, disposed of her body, and staged a bike crash in a rural area. Releasing this body camera footage from the hours after she was reported missing, police saying Morphew touched evidence.
Hey, could you not touch the bike with your hands, please?
For 4 years, the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew was a mystery that haunted Colorado. A mother vanished on Mother's Day, leaving behind a bike and a broken family. But when her remains were finally discovered, the answers only created a more terrifying puzzle. Lying next to her body was a single, weathered bullet. The defense claims this proves a stranger shot her, but the autopsy reveals a darker truth. Suzanne was not killed by a gun. Her bones were soaked in animal tranquilizer, a chemical that only her husband, Barry, possessed. So, we have to ask the question that changes everything. Why bring a bullet to a poisoning? Did Barry Morphew plant that bullet 3 years ago as a decoy to fool us all? I have combed through the court files and forensic reports to uncover the truth behind this staged deception. So, let's start with the moment the silence was finally broken. For over 3 years, the Suzanne Morphew case was defined by what we didn't have. We didn't have a crime scene. We didn't have a weapon. And most importantly, we didn't have a body. The prosecution was trying to build a murder case on thin air, which is exactly why the charges were dropped in 2022. But the high desert of Colorado has a way of keeping secrets only for so long. What happened next changed the entire landscape of this investigation. It was September 2023. Investigators were combing through a remote area in Moffat, Saguich County, about 45 miles south of the Morphew home. Locals call this place the Boneyard. It is a desolate stretch of sagebrush and dirt, the kind of place people go when they want to be invisible. The police were actually looking for remains related to a completely different cold case. They were not looking for Suzanne. But, as they sifted through the dry soil, they found something that didn't belong. First, they found clothing. A blue hoodie, hiking boots. And then, the undeniable proof, a medical port, the kind used for chemotherapy, still intact. Suzanne had come home. At the same time, investigators found something else lying in the dirt, right next to where her pelvic bone was discovered. It was small. It was metallic. And for the defense team, it was a miracle. It was a single, unspent bullet, specifically a .22 caliber round. And this is important because, in the world of criminal defense, this tiny piece of metal is worth its weight in gold. When this evidence was logged, the narrative shifted immediately. If you are a defense lawyer for Barry Morphew, you look at that bullet and you start writing a script. You say, "Look, there is a bullet." That means there was a gun. That means there was a shooter. They began to spin a theory that Suzanne was not killed by her husband in a domestic dispute. Instead, she was the victim of a tragic accident or a violent stranger. Maybe a hunter was out in the boneyard, missed his target, and hit Suzanne. Or maybe she was abducted by a random maniac with a pistol who took her out to the desert and executed her. The problem is, the bones do not lie. When the autopsy was conducted, a report we finally got to see in April 2024, the medical examiners looked for the story that Bullet was trying to tell. They examined the skull. They examined the ribs. They looked for fractures, for shattering, for the telltale signs of a high-velocity projectile tearing through bone. What I found was that they found absolutely nothing. There was no gunshot wound to the head. There was no bullet lodged in the spine. There was zero physical evidence on her skeleton to suggest that she was shot. Which means we are left with a massive contradiction. We have a victim lying in a shallow grave. We have a bullet lying right next to her hip. But the bullet did not kill her. So, why is it there? This brings us to the strategy we are seeing play out right now in the lead-up to the October 2026 trial. Barry Morphew's team is doubling down on what I call the phantom bullet defense. They are going to stand in front of that jury and say that the presence of this bullet creates reasonable doubt. They will argue that the police had tunnel vision, that they focused so hard on Barry that they ignored the evidence of a stranger. The thing is, when you look closer at the bullet itself, the stranger theory starts to fall apart. The report notes that the bullet was weathered. It had been exposed to the elements. It looked old. It wasn't a shiny new round dropped during a struggle the day she died. It looked like something that had been sitting in a pocket, or sitting in a garage, or lying in the dirt for a long time. At this point, I started questioning the convenience of it all. Think about who Barry Morphew is. He is an experienced hunter. He owns multiple guns. He has pockets full of ammunition. He knows how ballistics work. If Barry killed his wife using a silent chemical method, which we will get to in a minute, he would know that if her body was ever found, the chemicals might still be detectable. He would need a backup plan. He would need a red herring. He would need something that points away from a husband with a tranquilizer gun and points toward a stranger with a pistol. Which tells us that this bullet might not be a weapon at all. It might be a prop. It is the only lifeline Barry has left. Without this bullet, he is just a husband with a motive and the means to kill. But with this bullet, he has a story. He has a mystery attacker. The reason this matters is that juries can be swayed by physical objects. A bullet is something you can hold. It feels real. Chemical toxicology reports are complicated. They are just numbers on a page. Barry is banking on the fact that the jury will look at the shiny metal object and forget the invisible poison. From there, the prosecution has to prove a negative. They have to prove that the bullet didn't kill her, and they have to explain how it got there, and that is where the theory of staging comes in. We know Barry has a history of trying to control the narrative. We know about the bike. We know about the alibis. Is it so hard to believe that in his final act of disposing of his wife, he reached into his pocket and tossed a generic .22 caliber round into the grave, just in case? It is a chilling thought. It suggests a level of calculation that goes beyond simple rage. It suggests that even while he was burying the mother of his children, he was already planning his defense for a trial he hoped would never happen. So, I want to put this question to you, because this is exactly what the jury will be wrestling with. If you were digging in the desert and found a bullet lying next to a skeleton that had no gunshot wounds, what would you think? Would you believe a stranger dropped it by accident? Or would you believe it was planted there to trick you? So, if we accept that the bullet didn't kill her, and the bones tell us it didn't, then how did Suzanne Morphew die? This is where Barry's defense hits a brick wall, and that wall is built on forensic science. For a long time, the biggest weakness in this case was the unknown. Without a body, we couldn't say for sure how she died. Was it strangulation? Was it a beating? Was it a shooting? That ambiguity allowed the defense to float all kinds of theories. But, in April 2024, the coroner released the autopsy report, and it didn't just give us a cause of death. It gave us a signature. What I found was that investigators sent Suzanne's bone samples to a specialized toxicology lab. Now, usually, when you test bones that have been in the ground for 3 years, you are lucky to find anything. But in this case, the results were loud and clear. They found a specific cocktail of 3 banned substances in her marrow: butorphanol, azapirone, and medetomidine. In the investigation, they call this BAM. And this is important, because you need to understand what BAM is. You don't pick this up at your local pharmacy. You don't find this in a street banned substances overdose. This is a highly potent, regulated tranquilizer cocktail designed for one purpose: to drop large animals. We are talking about elk, bears, mountain lions. It shuts down the central nervous system almost instantly. It is designed to incapacitate a 500-pound beast in seconds. Which means, when this entered Suzanne's system, she didn't stand a chance. She wasn't fighting off an attacker. She wasn't running away. She was likely unconscious before she even hit the floor. The thing is, finding BAM in a human body is incredibly rare. It is almost unheard of in homicide cases. So, investigators did what good detectives do. They looked at the map. They asked, who in this entire region of Colorado has legal access to these specific chemicals? They checked with local veterinarians. They checked with wildlife officers. They checked with ranchers. And the list was very, very short. In fact, investigation documents reveal that Barry Morphew was the only private citizen in the area known to possess this exact chemical combination. At this point, we have to look at Barry's own words. Long before Suzanne was found, back when police were first questioning him, Barry made a stunning admission. He told investigators that he owned a tranquilizer gun. He admitted that he had these specific chemicals in his possession. His explanation: he told police he used the darts to tranquilize deer so he could cut off their antlers for his collection. Now, let's pause on that for a second. Wildlife experts will tell you that shooting deer with tranquilizers just to take their antlers is not only illegal, it is absurdly dangerous and expensive. No legitimate hunter does that. Which tells us that his excuse was flimsy from day one. But now, with the autopsy results, that admission becomes a confession. He admitted to having the murder weapon years before we knew it was the murder weapon. The reason this matters is that it destroys the stranger theory completely. Think about the odds. The defense wants you to believe that a random stranger abducted Suzanne. But for that to be true, this random stranger would have to be wandering around Maceville, Colorado, carrying a tranquilizer gun loaded with the exact same rare chemical cocktail that Barry Morphew had in his garage. Statistically, that is impossible. It is like a stranger breaking into your house and killing you with your own custom-made sword that nobody else owns. So, we have a clear picture of the murder. It was quiet. It was chemical. It was calculated. It wasn't a crime of passion where someone grabbed a gun in the heat of the moment. You have to load a dart. You have to prepare the mixture. But this brings us back to the bullet from part 1. If Barry went to all the trouble of using a silent, invisible weapon like BAM, something that leaves no blood, no bullet hole, no noise, why on earth would he bring a bullet to the burial site? It seems contradictory, right? Why use a smart weapon and then leave a dumb clue? What I found was that this contradiction is actually the key to understanding Barry's mindset. He knew that BAM was a risk. He knew that if the body was found fresh, the needle mark might be seen. He knew that chemicals linger. So, he needed to muddy the waters. He needed to plant a seed of doubt that would grow over time. The bullet wasn't a mistake. It was an insurance policy. He was betting that by the time she was found, the chemicals might be gone, but the bullet would remain. He was trying to frame a hunter that didn't exist. Which means the BAM proves he did it, and the bullet proves he planned to get away with it. We are looking at a man who tried to outsmart forensic science. He thought the earth would wash away the chemicals, leaving only his planted evidence behind. But he was wrong. The bones held on to the truth. So I have to ask you, because this is the detail that locks it all together, do you believe in that kind of coincidence? Do you think it is possible that a random attacker just happened to use the exact rare tranquilizer that Suzanne's husband admitted to owning? Or is that chemical signature the final proof you need? Let me know your verdict on the chemicals below. Because once you accept the poison, the rest of his lies start to crumble. So, to believe that Barry Morphew planted a bullet in 2020 to confuse a jury in 2026, you have to believe that he is capable of staging a crime scene. You have to believe that he is the kind of man who doesn't just commit a crime, but designs a set to cover it up. The thing is, we don't have to guess about this. We don't have to speculate if he has that kind of cunning. We already have the proof. Because the bullet wasn't the first time Barry tried to sell us a fake story. To understand his pattern, we have to go back to the very beginning, May 10, 2020. Mother's Day. This was the day the kidnapping narrative was born. When police arrived at the scene, they were told that Suzanne had gone for a bike ride and never came back. Barry was the one who pushed this narrative hard. He told them she went biking. He told them she was alone. And sure enough, later that day, investigators found her mountain bike. It was located at the bottom of a steep, rugged ravine off County Road 225. From a distance, it looked catastrophic. A bike tossed down a cliff implies a violent crash or a struggle where she was run off the road, or a terrifying abduction where she was snatched and the bike was discarded. But when investigators climbed down that ravine to process the scene, the story started to fall apart instantly. What I found was a scene that defied the laws of physics. The terrain there is rough. It is full of rocks, sharp scrub oak, and loose dirt. If a human being on a bike goes over that edge, whether by accident or by force, there is going to be damage. Metal scrapes against stone, paint chips, tires skid, handlebars twist. The bike should have looked like it went through a war zone. The problem is, Suzanne's bike was pristine. The police report details are damning. The bike had no significant scratches consistent with a crash. The brakes were working perfectly. The gears were intact. It looked like someone had carried it to the edge of the road and gently tossed it over, taking care not to ruin it. It was too clean. It was too perfect. And then, there was the helmet. If Suzanne had been attacked while riding, or if she had crashed, that helmet would be the first thing to show impact. It would be cracked, scuffed, or at least lying at a distance, suggesting it flew off during a struggle. Instead, investigators found the helmet lying on the ground, practically undisturbed. It wasn't cracked. It wasn't battered. It was just there. At this point, the investigators knew something was wrong. One deputy noted in the affidavit that the scene looked staged. It didn't look like violence. It looked like theater, which tells us everything we need to know about Barry's mindset on that day. He wasn't acting like a grieving husband searching for his wife. He was acting like a director setting a stage. He needed the police to focus on the road, not the house. He needed them to focus on a bike accident or a stranger abduction, not on the domestic reality of their marriage. So, he took her bike, her favorite thing, and he used it as a prop. He threw it down a ravine to create a visual distraction. The reason this matters is that it establishes a clear pattern of behavior. If Barry Morphew was willing to stage the bike to explain her disappearance, it is completely logical that he would stage the bullet to explain her death. Think about the timeline. He kills her with chemicals BAME in the house. That's the murder. He plants the bike in the ravine. That's the cover story for where she went. He plants the bullet in the grave. That's the cover story for how she died, just in case she was ever found. It is the exact same tactic, repeated twice. The bike was decoy number 1. It was meant to send police on a wild goose chase in the mountains. The bullet was decoy number 2. It was meant to send the jury on a wild goose chase after a phantom shooter. In other words, the bullet isn't an anomaly. It is a signature. It is the work of a man who thinks he is smarter than the police, a man who believes he can manipulate the physical evidence to fit his script. He failed with the bike because the physics didn't make sense. And now, in 2026, he is failing with the bullet because the chemistry doesn't make sense. So I have to ask you to look at the photo of that ravine. Do you believe a woman could crash down a rocky cliff without scratching her bike or cracking her helmet? Or does that scene look exactly like what the police said it was, a setup? And if he faked the bike, why wouldn't he fake the bullet? Let me know if you buy the bike crash theory, or if you see the hands of a staged event. So, we have a staged bike, we have a staged stranger abduction. But to really understand how deep this deception goes, we have to look at the man himself. We have to look at Barry Morphew, not as a grieving husband, but as what he truly is, a hunter. The thing is, a hunter doesn't just react to the environment, he manipulates it. He tracks, he baits, he covers his scent. And in the days leading up to Suzanne's disappearance, Barry wasn't just living his life. He was covering his scent before the crime even happened. What I found in the 129-page arrest affidavit is a detail that is so bizarre, so specific, that it actually gives away the entire game. When police first started questioning Barry, they asked him about his activities on that Mother's Day weekend. They asked him if he had fired any weapons. Now, usually, a husband whose wife just vanished would be talking about her, or the last time he saw her. But Barry wanted to talk about chipmunks. He told investigators that on Saturday, the day before Suzanne went missing, he was running around his property shooting chipmunks. And not just one or two. He claimed he shot 85 chipmunks. At this point, you have to pause. 85 chipmunks. That is an extermination, not a casual afternoon. But why would he offer up this strange detail unprompted? Why would he want the police to know he was firing a gun? The reason this matters is gunshot residue, or GSR. Barry knows that if you fire a gun or a tranquilizer dart gun, it leaves invisible chemical traces on your hands and clothes. He knew that if the police suspected him, the first thing they would do is swab his hands. If they found GSR, he would be the prime suspect immediately. So, by inventing, or exaggerating, this chipmunk massacre, he was creating a preemptive alibi. He was planting an explanation. If they found residue, he could just say, "Oh, that's from the chipmunks." He was insulating himself against forensic science before the police even arrived. Which tells us that this was premeditated. You don't accidentally come up with a GSR alibi. You plan it. It shows that he was thinking about shooting and residue and police investigations while his wife was still alive. And this is important because it links directly back to the bullet we found in the grave in part 1. See the pattern. On Saturday, he uses the chipmunk story to explain away any evidence of shooting found on him. On Sunday, he uses the bike crash to explain away the evidence of her disappearance. And in the grave, he leaves the phantom bullet to explain away the body if it's ever found. It is all the same strategy. He is constantly introducing guns and shooting into the narrative to distract from the truth. He wants us to look at the gun he used on the chipmunks. He wants us to look at the bullet in the grave. He desperately wants this to be a shooting case. Because if it's a shooting case, it could be anyone. Anyone can have a gun. Anyone can shoot the .22 caliber bullet. But if it's a tranquilizer case, that leads back to only one man. In other words, the chipmunk story was the opening act, and the planted bullet was the closing act. They are bookends to the same lie. He was trying to frame the narrative within the context of a shooting, to hide the chemical reality of what he actually did. He was thinking like a hunter laying a trail. He wanted the police to follow the scent of the gunpowder, leading them away from the scent of the poison. So I have to ask you, does the story of shooting 85 chipmunks sound like a normal weekend activity to you? Or does it sound like a man who is terrified of being tested for gunshot residue and is frantically building an excuse? If he lied about the chipmunks to cover his tracks, isn't it obvious he planted the bullet for the exact same reason? Tell me if you buy the chipmunk alibi, or if you see it for what it is. So, we have established that Barry was potentially planting stories about chipmunks to cover up gunshot residue. But words are one thing. Actions are another. And on the morning of May 10, 2020, which was Mother's Day, Barry's actions were not just suspicious. They were frantic. To understand why the bullet in the grave is such a calculated move, we have to look at what Barry did with the rest of the evidence. What I found in the GPS data analysis from his truck is one of the most damning sequences in the entire 129-page affidavit. Investigators call it the trash run. On the morning his wife supposedly disappeared, Barry didn't stay home to wait for her. He didn't join the search. Instead, he drove toward Broomfield, near Denver, claiming he had a landscaping job. But the telematics on his truck tell a very different story. He didn't just go to a job site. He went on a tour of trash cans. The data shows Barry stopping at 5 different locations to dispose of trash. He stopped at a hotel. He stopped at a men's warehouse. He stopped at a McDonald's. At each location, he dumped items from his truck. The problem is, this doesn't make sense for a normal contractor. Why spread your trash across a city? Why not dump it all in one place? The prosecution argues that he was peeling away the layers of the crime. He was likely disposing of the tranquilizer dart casing. He was getting rid of the cap for the needle. He was likely dumping the clothes he wore when he buried her. At this point, what struck me was the selectivity of it all. This creates a massive contradiction that brings us right back to the phantom bullet. Think about it. Barry is driving all over Colorado to hide evidence. He is terrified of being caught. He is scrubbing his truck. He is dumping items in random bins to make sure they are never found. He is cleaning up everything that points to him. But he left the bullet right next to her body, which means he made a choice. When he was at the burial site in Moffat, he had the opportunity to leave nothing behind. He could have left a clean grave. But he didn't. He left a .22 caliber round. This is the key to the staging theory. He disposed of the real weapon, the tranquilizer components, because that evidence screams Barry Morphew. He kept and planted the fake weapon, the bullet, because that evidence screams stranger. The reason this matters is that it proves he wasn't just panic dumping everything he touched. He was sorting. He was thinking, trash the dart, because that catches me, but plant the bullet, because that frees me. It is a level of criminal hygiene that is terrifying. It suggests that even while he was zigzagging across Broomfield, looking over his shoulder, he was confident because he knew he had already planted his insurance policy in the dirt back in Moffat. And this is important, because the defense in 2026 wants you to focus on the bullet. They want you to think, look, a bullet, maybe she was shot. But the trash run proves that Barry knows exactly how to get rid of things he doesn't want found. If the bullet was incriminating to him, it would have ended up in a dumpster behind a McDonald's in Broomfield. The fact that it stayed with Suzanne means he wanted it to be found. In other words, the trash run and the grave site are opposites. The trash run was about hiding the truth, which was the chemical poison. The grave site was about planting a lie, which was the bullet. So I have to ask you, does a man whose wife is missing make 5 separate trash stops on Mother's Day morning? And if he was so careful to hide the tranquilizer evidence, does it make any sense that he would accidentally leave a bullet at the crime scene? Or was that the one piece of trash he needed us to find? Tell me if you think the trash run proves he was cleaning up a chemical crime, not a shooting. So, when we pull back and look at the entire map of this crime, from the chemicals found in the marrow to the trash cans in Broomfield, a terrifying picture finally emerges. It is not a picture of a husband snapping in a moment of rage and panic. It is a picture of a man playing a game of chess against the justice system, a man who was thinking 5 moves ahead before the first move was even made. To truly understand what happened to Suzanne Morphew, and to understand the battle we are watching in the courtroom in 2026, we have to look at this crime as a 3-layered stage. Layer 1 is the method. This is the BAM. Barry used the tranquilizer because it was efficient. It was silent. It was bloodless. In a house with daughters, in a quiet neighborhood, you cannot use a gun. A gun is loud. A gun leaves a mess. A gun wakes the neighbors. So he used the chemical weapon that only he possessed. It was the perfect tool for the murder itself. Layer 2 is the immediate cover story. This is the bike. Barry knew that when the sun came up on Mother's Day, he needed a reason for Suzanne to be gone. He couldn't say she just walked away. So he took her bike and threw it down a ravine. This was designed to create immediate chaos. It was designed to make the police look for a missing person, not a dead body. It was a visual distraction to buy him time to clean the house and make his trash run. But then we get to layer 3, and this is the one that sends chills down my spine. This is the bullet. Barry Morphew is a smart man. He knows that bikes get found. He knows that bodies eventually get found. He knew that if investigators ever discovered Suzanne's remains, the bike story would expire. He needed a story that would last forever. He needed a story that would work even if she was just a skeleton in the dirt. This is where the concept of counter-forensics comes in. Most criminals try to remove evidence. They wipe fingerprints. They bleach floors. They hide bodies. But a master manipulator does something different. He creates evidence. He introduces false data into the crime scene to act as a virus, infecting the investigation and confusing the jury years later. I want you to imagine the moment of burial in the barnyard. Barry has driven 45 miles. He has dug the shallow grave. He has placed Suzanne inside. At that moment, the only evidence in that hole is the victim and the invisible poison in her bones. If he covers her up now and she is found later, the poison points straight to him. So, he reaches into his pocket. He pulls out a weathered .22 caliber bullet. Maybe it was a stray round he picked up from a shooting range years ago. Maybe it was something he found in his garage. He doesn't fire it. He doesn't use it. He simply drops it into the dirt next to her hip. In that split second, he changed the future. He knew that if the police ever found her, they would sift the dirt. They would find that piece of metal. And the moment they found it, the questions would start. Who shot her? Was it a hunter? Was it a stranger? Was it a mugging gone wrong? That bullet was his insurance policy. It was a time bomb of reasonable doubt, set to explode the moment she was unearthed. What I found is that this theory explains every contradiction in the case. It explains why a man who drove all over Broomfield to hide dart caps would leave a bullet at the scene. He hid the dart because it was the truth. He planted the bullet because it was the lie. And look at where we are now. It is January 2026. The trial is approaching. And what is the defense doing? They are doing exactly what Barry predicted they would do. They are holding up that bullet. They are telling the judge that this proves a stranger was there. The plan worked. The seed he planted in that grave has grown into the very defense strategy that might keep him out of prison. This reveals a level of psychological detachment that is hard to comprehend. It means that even while he was disposing of his wife, he wasn't mourning. He wasn't even panicking. He was calculating. He was constructing a puzzle that he knew would take us years to solve. The bike was for the police in 2020. The bullet was for the jury in 2026. So, when you look at the face of Barry Morphew in the courtroom photos, do not just see a husband. See the architect of a 3-year deception. See the man who tried to rewrite the forensic history of his own crime. And this leads me to the question that I need you to answer. The question that will define how history remembers this case. Based on everything we have uncovered, from the tranquilizer to the trash run, and finally to this planted bullet, what do you see? Do you see a man who acted in a sudden fit of rage and got lucky? Or do you see a master manipulator who planned every single step, planting clues like breadcrumbs to lead us away from the truth? Tell me in the comments if you think he is a mastermind or just a desperate liar. I want to read your theories. So here we are. It is January 2026. The snow is falling again in Maysville, covering the same ground where Suzanne Morphew took her last breath, and covering the same dirt where she lay hidden for 3 years. But inside the courtroom, everything is being laid bare. On January 12th, just a few weeks ago, I watched as Barry Morphew walked back into the legal arena. The arrogance we saw in the early days, the man who chased chipmunks and pushed reporters away, was gone. In its place was a quiet, calculated resolve. He stood before the judge and entered his plea, not guilty. But the most telling moment wasn't what he said. It was what his team did. They waived the right to a speedy trial. They asked for time. They pushed the date all the way to October 13th, 2026. Why? Because they know they are in the fight of their lives. They know that the BAM evidence is a wall that is nearly impossible to climb over. So they need these next 9 months to polish the bullet. They need time to turn that rusty piece of metal found in the grave into a believable story of a phantom killer. What we are about to witness in October is not just a trial. It is a collision between two realities. On one side, you have the defense. They will hold up the phantom bullet. They will project photos of it on massive screens. They will bring in ballistics experts to talk about trajectories and calibers. They will tell the jury a story about a violent stranger, a story that feels cinematic and terrifying. They will rely on the fear that it could happen to anyone. They are banking on the fact that a bullet is something you can see, something you can understand. It is the perfect lie because it is tangible. On the other side, you have the prosecution. They will hold up a toxicology report. They will talk about butorphanol, azapirone, and medetomidine. They will talk about chemical half-lives and bone marrow absorption. They will tell a story about a husband who used his own hunting supplies to silence his wife. Their story is colder. It is scientific. It relies on the truth that molecules don't lie. This brings us to the ultimate lesson of the Suzanne Morphew case, a lesson that every criminal and every investigator needs to understand. Barry Morphew thought he could control the narrative because he is a man who understands the physical world. He knows how to move dirt. He knows how to throw a bike. He knows how to drop a bullet. He thought that if he staged the physical scene perfectly, he could fool us. And for a while he did. He fooled the police with the bike. He confused the timeline with the chipmunks. But he forgot about the invisible world. He didn't account for the chemistry. He didn't account for the fact that the earth acts as a vault. When he buried Suzanne, he thought he was erasing her. In reality, he was preserving the evidence. The soil kept her. The marrow in her bones held onto the tranquilizer like a recording device, waiting for someone to press play. The lesson here is that you can stage a crime scene, but you cannot stage science. You can plant a bullet, but you cannot plant a chemical signature inside someone's bones. The physical world can be manipulated, but the chemical world is absolute. Barry tried to use a hunter's trick to beat a forensic reality, and in 2026, that is a gamble you are going to lose. So, as we look toward October 13th, the countdown has officially begun. For the next 9 months, Barry Morphew will be living in a state of suspended animation, out on bond, wearing an ankle monitor, waiting for the day he has to answer for the poison. I will be tracking every motion filed between now and then. I want to see if the defense tries to suppress the BAM report. I want to see if they find a witness to support the bullet theory. This is a chess game, and we are in the endgame now. And finally, I want to turn this over to you. You have walked through the timeline with me. You have seen the bike in the ravine. You have traced the trash run through Broomfield. You have seen the bullet in the grave. When the verdict is finally read in October 2026, what do you think will happen? Do you think the jury will be swayed by the phantom bullet and let him walk free? Or do you think the BAM in the bones will be the chains that finally drag him to prison? Drop your prediction in the comments. Bullet or poison? Let me know which evidence wins. I am going to keep digging until the gavel drops. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next update.